You're welcome from the break. Let's now get the views of Honorable Patrick Boamah. He is the former chair of Parliament Finance Committee and a member of Parliament as well on the economy and the IMF program. Your thought on this whole IMF meetings and even the global economy and all the rest, and how things are shaping up and how the fund has given the assurance that they will assist Ghana if the request is made and all the rest. Let me quickly get your thoughts on that one, since we are all being covered under this annual meetings that we are all here.
Okay. Thank you very much, and George, for the opportunity. I think it's refreshing for the fund to have made that commitment to assist government with any request that it comes up with, provided it falls within the framework of the program. That is refreshing. We need our economy to grow at certain levels before we can actually feel the effects of all those macro and microeconomic indicators in our pockets. So it's refreshing, and I encourage government to come up with strategic programs that will be acceptable to the fund and the bank to be able to assist government. I know the fourth tranche of the arrangements that we have with the fund has been released.
Yeah, I mean we've passed the fourth review, going to the board for it to be released in June. Yeah,
it will be released. I believe so, and I hope it's going to affect our currency situation and bring some stability on the market. Because if you are going to be receiving over $300 million, it adds up to your reserves and gives some assurance to the business community about currency stabilization, what have you.
Honorable, you've spoken about the currency. Already we've seen over the past 2 days, we've seen some big rallying of the currency. If you look at the Bloomberg platform and even the commercial banks read. I mean, knowing where you're coming from, your background and all the rest, for you, what should be done by those who are managing the monetary space to sustain the gains that we are seeing with the local currency?
For me, as a lawyer and somebody who is a student in this area, I think it's about confidence that the managers of the economy bring to bear on the financial market and space, and to the investor community, that affects their projections into how their currency is going to perform. Secondly, there are a lot of arrears on the books of government that ought to be paid. But the investors, you and I know, are aware of this, and they are asking questions as to the effect of those payments on the city. For example, if you have about 18 billion cities on the books of government, what will be the net effect if government starts paying? Because I know for a fact that government has not been paying some of these areas over the last 6 months. And if you look at the quantum on the books of government, like I said, what will be the effect of those releases on the currency's depreciation? You must look at that, and I believe the investors are also looking at it. So it's early days. I saw the CD to the dollar around 14.9.
Yeah, from coming from the 15 range over last week. Yeah.
Yes, it means something has happened that we need to investigate, whether it's artificial or whether it's through some ingenuity from the governor's end or the finance ministry.
So don't forget that the dollar on the global market is also struggling as well, so that could also be a contributing factor.
It's a contributory factor. Secondly, this issue of tariff war that is going on. You could tell that if importers are not arranging for the needed dollar from the central bank, it will also ease some pressure on the bank. That will also affect the depreciation of the city. So let's watch the space. If all these tariff issues are resolved, I believe the Chinese and Americans are doing their thing. And if government decides to start paying arrears owed contractors, service providers, and what have you, then we can easily assess whether government has done something technically right to ensure that the city is stabilized.
So you feel that it's a brief relief, but
I believe so.
Let's watch the space and see how government would also manage the servicing of these debt and the end impact on the local currency.
You see, depreciation affects the overall GDP or the debt stock of government. At the last review, we realized that the debt to GDP ratio was confirmed by the World Bank and the IMF to be about 61.8%. They also confirmed the growth rate of the economy as of December 2024 to be about 5.7%. They are now telling us that the projections in our budget of about 4.4% growth rate is being revised to about 3.9%. I believe they have also factored into their projections some of these issues that we are talking about. Because if you haven't paid contractors, if the arrear sitting on your books is about 18 billion Ghana cedis or so, receipts that are pending at the Controller and Accountant General's office and what have you. So if they do a net effect of all these releases, coupled with the happenings on the global economy, the struggling dollar and the tariff war that is going on, and the issues within the country as a whole, then it takes you, or a reasonable person, to say that, look, this is a brief respite for the city. Let's see how it performs within the next 6 months. Thirdly, George, government is now beginning to implement some of the tax reforms that Parliament approved at the end of March. And I don't believe government has been able to accrue the needed revenue based on their projections within the fiscal table. So those are some of the factors that I want us to take a look at, assessing how strong the city has performed over the last.
And whether the current trend can be sustained, actually.
We live to see.
Oh, no, but I want to come back. I know you're on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I don't know whether the Trade and the Finance Committee will also be working with you. There's this push for us to engage the U.S. government on extension of AGOA and see how we can mitigate these tariff shocks on the Ghanaian economy. I don't know whether it has come to your level, and at the committee level, what you will also be pushing to use the diplomatic channels to try and see whether we can get the AGOA extended, and also see whether these tariff things can be reviewed for Ghana. No matter how little it's on Ghana, the indirect impacts could be worth for the economy, some will say.
Thank you very much. You see, there are companies who purposefully set up to benefit under AGOA. Madam Salma's company, Unity, they are into garment and textiles and what have you. At the UTC, some are the free zones enclave. If we don't push for an extension, it will lead to a lot of job losses and revenue shortfalls for government. So I believe that, one, we must push for an extension of the AGOA and to be able to capitalize on its benefits. Secondly, with the tariff wars going on, you need to also encourage the local business community to increase their export potential by giving them the right or the needed incentives. You see, we cannot sit and be spoon-fed for a long time. We need to win ourselves
Explore new market here.
Some of these policies, because if the U.S. is giving you an opportunity under the African Growth and Opportunities Act, which has been in place for more than close to 20 years.
President Kufuor's time.
Yes, around 2003, thereabout. Then you need to ask yourself, what have you been able to do in the area of AGOA to expand your export potential, to be able to rake in the FX or the Forex that is supposed to support the growth of your economy. So I believe an extension of AGWA is good, but it shouldn't be in perpetuity, so that we are able to build the kind of local industry that we require. That is why I was a firm believer in the One District, One Factory program, regardless of the challenges and the abuse of some of the entities. Because if we don't take steps as a country to build local capacity in the industry, the expected job creation that we've been talking about will be an illusion. Secondly, local pharmaceutical companies like Aquatic Life Sciences, NS Chemists, Amponsa Ifa, Tobinco and Co., they need to be encouraged to be producing within the local market to avoid the importation of some of these drugs onto our market. So there are strategic areas that government ought to look at in terms of textile export, in terms of pharmaceutical, in terms of import substitution, agro-based industry. I'm happy government is talking about agribusiness, but if you look at the budget lines for the Ministry of Trade and Ministry of Agriculture, you ask yourself,
they're insufficient.
They're very insufficient if you want to make a projection into hitting the big market with some of the targeted crops that you need to export to be able to generate the revenue that it requires. It means you have to be putting in a lot of money to support the
Oh, no, but I was just trying to find out whether at the committee level you'll be pushing for these diplomatic channels in terms of the engagement, so that we could, because I know the committee level you have engagement with diplomatic partners, and even you are here as well, whether we can be pushing that diplomatic channel to see the possible extension of the AGWA, and even, let's say, minimizing the shocks as well.
When I was chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee, there was one thing I instituted, that at every bi-week, bi-monthly, twice a month, I invited the ambassadors from some of the countries that Ghana had a lot of trade relations going on: China, the United States, the UK, Italy, and Nigeria, to discuss how we could improve upon our trade relationships with them. By so doing, you are able to profile suggestions or ideas to them, especially in such challenging times. And I will encourage the new chair and assist him into putting in place some of these programs, so that it gives them an idea as to the Parliament of Ghana's perspective on our trade relationship with them. You'll be there and they'll report Ghana's trade surplus is this. We had a trade arrangement with China and exceeded $1 billion. How did we get there? Can't we do 10 billion? Can't we do 15 billion if some of these bottlenecks are removed? So these are some of the things that I'll be encouraging the committee to look at. This morning I even read that the U.S. is asking their nationals to be wary of 4 countries they'll be visiting in April, which included Ghana, Morocco, and I think Uganda and another country. Those are things that also impede on growth and trade relations that we ought to look at when some of these issues crop up. So it's a myriad of issues. 1, continuous engagement with them. 2, identifying the bottlenecks within the trade arrangements that we have, because most of the time we have bilateral arrangements with them, but we need to continue and establish strong trading desks or bilateral desks with some of the very important trading hubs globally. And you can't do so without talking about the United States, where we are now. China, very big global power. I respect them so much for what they've done. We need to identify new economies
that we can explore.
Vietnam, what they are doing, and what we can learn from them. Far East, South Korea, and what have you. These are economies that appreciate where you are and could hold hands together and grow.
Honorable, let's talk about taxes. Let's talk about tax exemptions. And I know where you're coming from. The IMF managing director in a press conference spoke about the fact that we need to do more in the area of domestic revenue mobilization in these times. And she's saying that we have no excuse when it comes to taking a second look at tax exemptions and even the reliefs and all those things we offer. We need to raise more revenue locally. From where you are coming from and the work you've done in Parliament, the work you continue to do, let's first start on the bit about domestic revenue mobilization. What help is Parliament going to do, the laws and all the rest, to ensure that the Minister of Finance is able to raise the required revenue locally? Because the MFND is saying that looking at the global challenges, aid is going to go down significantly. People are not going to buy your stuff to give you the effects you want. Your next savior is raise more revenue locally.
I agree with the IMF and the fact that we no country develops without maximizing local revenue, because that's what they also generate, and you go and tap into it as loans and other grants. The big powers signaled to us, for example, America, when they started canceling some grants and aids to Africa. And if you want to talk about tax exemption, you need to also look at areas where an exemption of tax will lead to an exponential growth within the shortest possible time. I don't think the IMF was talking about a complete removal of tax exemption, but to be very strategic in areas. I've mentioned the pharmaceutical sector. I've mentioned the textile sector and other agro-processing areas where we need to be strategic to be able to give the needed tax exemption. But if you go to the free zones, you realize that we haven't been able to check the free zones operators, whether they are within the tax exemption brackets that we gave to them. I want to encourage government to look at that carefully, because I feel that if under the free zones policy, you're supposed to export 70% of what you produce and trade about 30% domestically. There could be some abuse there. And I will encourage government to reshuffle some of the arrangements of personnel within the area and not have too many permanent people assessing the books of some of the operators within the enclave.
And you believe that we should take a second look at these exemptions, because the argument that it's been abused and we are not using it well as a country?
George, when I was chair of finance committee, I wrote to the GRA to give me an idea, data of every company that is enjoying some tax relief, one way or the other, whether in the free zones, and I can share with you, it's voluminous, and I don't know the capacity of the GRA to be able to, line by line, assess whether they are doing the right thing with regards to the exemptions that they've been given. That is what we have to look at. Whether we have to modify it by giving them tax credits instead of exemption is another discussion. So I think we must take a second look
and review it as well.
And review our tax exemption.
No, well, I appreciate your time so much, and thanks so much, and have a good day. It's been great talking to you, and we wish you all the best. Please.
A coverage of the IMF spring meetings that has ended, and also a special edition of PM Express Business Edition. The debate will go on in your homes and your offices, but I'll say, have a great day. My name is George Alfe from Washington, D.C., USA, and not in Accra, Ghana.